The year is 73 BC. You're cornered in a narrow kitchen in Capua, surrounded by the smell of burning fat and adrenaline. You are a gladiator, a weapon forged for the arena, but right now you are unarmed. The guards are closing in. The secret escape plan has leaked. You have seconds to live. You don't freeze. You reach into the fire and grab a scorching iron spit used for roasting meat. Next to you, a comrade seizes a heavy cleaver. This is the raw, ugly beginning of the Spartacus Slave Revolt. Forget the polished armor and heroic speeches of Hollywood. This revolution begins with kitchen utensils, desperation, and a chaotic massacre in a hallway. How did a brawl with cooking knives spiral into a war that nearly destroyed the Roman Republic? Before we dive into the blood and the snow, if you want to uncover the gritty reality behind the legends, please hit that like button and subscribe. It helps these stories reach more people. And leave a comment below. I'd love to know which historical figure you think is most misunderstood. The conspiracy at the school of Lentulus Batiatus was never meant to be a war. It was a prison break. 200 men planned to slip away into the night. But in a place where starvation makes men turn on each other, silence is a luxury. A traitor whispered the details to the masters. The crackdown is instant. Guards flood the barracks. They lock the armory. They seal the exits. The conspirators face a choice: wait for execution or fight with whatever they can touch. 70 men make their move. They surge toward the kitchen. They bypass the locked armory entirely, seizing what they desire from the scullery. Roasting spits become spears. Cleavers become axes. Knives used to peel onions are now slashing at the throats of armored guards. The violence is frantic and close quarters. Metal clashes against bone. The gladiators overwhelm the sentries through sheer numbers and ferocity. They burst out of the Luda, sprinting through the streets of Capua. Chaos grips the city. The citizens panic. They see blood-soaked giants running past their shops, not stopping to loot, only intent on escape. The fugitives reach the city gates, and fortune finally smiles on them. They collide with a wagon train transporting legitimate gladiatorial weapons to another city. They seize the crates. Now they have tridents, nets, and short swords. They fight off the local militia and disappear into the countryside. But Spartacus, the man emerging as their leader, makes a critical decision here. He orders the men to abandon the gladiator weapons as soon as they defeat their first real Roman soldiers. He rejects the symbols of the arena. He wants the gladius and the scutum, the sword and shield of the legion. He's not building a troop of entertainers. He's building an army. They retreat to the slopes of Mount Vesuvius. The volcano is dormant, a massive, jagged fortress of rock and wild vines. It offers the perfect defensive position. Rome remains arrogant. The Senate dismisses the threat, calling it a tumult, a minor disturbance. They do not send a consul. They send a praetor, Claudius Glaber, with a hastily gathered force of 3,000 militia. Glaber arrives at Vesuvius and sees the slaves trapped on the summit. He looks at the sheer cliff surrounding the volcano and smiles. He controls the only path up or down. He decides against a direct assault. Why risk lives? He will simply wait. Hunger will force the slaves to surrender. He orders his men to set up camp at the base of the trail and blocking the exit. Up on the ridge, the situation deteriorates fast. The slaves have no food. They have no water. The path down is blocked by 3,000 armed men. Spartacus surveys the perimeter. The drop from the crater rim is terrifyingly steep, a vertical wall of rock that Glaber has left unguarded because no sane man would attempt it. But Spartacus finds opportunity in the impossible. He points to the wild vines choking the crater's edge. The men get to work. They cut the thick vines, twisting and braiding them into long, sturdy ladders. As night falls, the wind picks up, masking the sound of their movement. One by one, they slip over the edge. They dangle thousands of feet above the jagged rocks, descending into the pitch blackness. The descent is grueling. Hands bleed. Muscles scream. But they keep moving. They reach the bottom, one shadow after another, undetected. Glaber sleeps soundly. His sentries watch the main path, oblivious to the threat circling behind them. The sun has not yet risen when the screaming starts. The slaves attack from the rear. They do not fight like gladiators. They fight like wolves. Glaba's militia, waking up to swords in their faces, disintegrates. It is a slaughter. The Roman camp collapses in minutes. Spartacus stands amidst the wreckage of the Roman camp. He holds a Roman officer's sword. He wears a Roman officer's cloak. The kitchen knives are gone. The revolt has survived its birth. But this victory brings a new problem. Success attracts attention, and with attention comes recruits. Success is a dangerous thing. After the victory at Vesuvius, the trickle of runaways turns into a flood. They come from the vineyards, the mines, and the latifundia estates of the south. Gauls, Germans, Thracians, Syrians, a babel of languages and grudges. By the onset of winter, Spartacus finds himself commanding not 70 gladiators, but a swelling mass of nearly 70,000 souls. This is no longer a band of fugitives, it is a migration. But a migration cannot fight legions. Most of these men are shepherds and field hands. They know how to shear sheep, not how to hold a shield line against a Roman charge. Spartacus realizes that if they meet a real army in open battle, they will be slaughtered. So, the winter of 73 BC becomes a season of impossible industry. The camp transforms into a massive open-air factory. Spartacus enforces a discipline harder than any Roman master. He forbids the hoarding of gold and silver. He wants iron. They raid local prisons and unchain the convicts not to liberate them, but to melt down their fetters to forge sword blades. They cut down timber to harden into spear shafts. They strip the hides from cattle to make shields. Spartacus drills them relentlessly. He teaches the shepherds to fight in formation, to move as one organism. He takes the raw chaos of the mob and hammers it into the structure of a Roman legion. He knows the enemy's playbook because he once read from it. He's building a mirror image of the Roman army, forged from the very people Rome tried to crush. But as the army grows, so does the tension at its heart. The Third Servile War is not led by one man, but by a committee of captains, and the rift between them is widening. On one side stands Spartacus. He is pragmatic. He looks at the map and sees the reality. Rome has endless manpower. They cannot win a war of attrition. His plan is clear: march north, cross the Alps, and disperse the men back to their homelands in Gaul and Thrace. He offers them freedom through escape. On the other side stands Crixus. Crixus is a Gaul of immense physical power and a different kind of charisma. He looks at the soft, wealthy cities of southern Italy and sees opportunity. Why walk over the freezing Alps to return to a life of poverty? Why run when they are winning? Crixus wants to stay. He wants to sack the rich coastal towns. He wants to make Rome bleed. He offers the men freedom through conquest. The army becomes a two-headed beast. One head looks to the mountains, the other looks to the plunder. For now, the success of their raids keeps the peace, but the fracture is there, hairline deep, waiting to shatter. Rome, stung by Glaba's defeat, tries again. They send the praetor Publius Varinius. He arrives not with a militia, but with a more organized force. He expects to face a disorganized rabble. He finds ghosts. Spartacus fights a war of movement that Varinius cannot comprehend. The slave army strikes and vanishes. They ambush foraging parties. They cut supply lines. In one humiliating encounter, Spartacus nearly captures Varinius himself while the praetor is bathing. The Roman commander barely escapes, leaving behind his lictors, his horse, and the fascias, the bundle of rods and axe that symbolizes the legal authority of a Roman magistrate. Imagine the shock in the Senate when news arrives. Spartacus, a runaway slave, is now carrying the fascias, the ultimate symbol of Roman power. It is a deliberate mockery. He is telling them, I am the law now. Varinius tries to pin them down. He creates a blockade, trapping the slave army in a valley, confident he has finally cornered the rat. He watches their campfires burning brightly all night. He hears the sentries blowing trumpets at regular intervals. He waits for dawn to launch the final assault. Morning comes. Varinius orders the charge. His troops storm the slave camp, swords drawn, ready to kill. They find nothing but silence. The camp is empty. The sentries are corpses lashed to wooden stakes, dressed in armor to look like guards from a distance. The trumpeter was a single man left behind to keep up the ruse. While Varinius stared at the fires, the entire slave army, Tens of thousands of men, women and children had slipped away in silence through the unguarded flank. Verinius is disgraced. The Roman south is left wide open. The slaves spend the winter fattening themselves on the spoils of Metapontum and Thurii. They are kings in a land that enslaved them. But the spring of 72 BC brings a change in the wind. The Senate is done playing games. They declare a state of emergency. They stop treating this as a police action and start treating it as a war. They recall the consuls, the two highest elected officials in the Republic. Gellius Publicola and Gnaeus Cornelius Lentulus Clodianus are mobilized. They bring with them 4 full legions, 20,000 professional killers. Spartacus knows the time for raiding is over. He orders the army to pack up. They are marching north towards the Alps, towards home. But Crixus does not move. The Gaul stands his ground. He has 30,000 men loyal to him, mostly Gauls and Germans who share his thirst for Roman blood. They refuse to leave the rich lands of Italy. The split is final. Spartacus marches north with the main body. Crixus breaks away, taking his 30,000 men to the slopes of Mount Garganus. It is a fatal mistake. The Romans are not Verinius. They are not Glaber. They are a hammer, and Crixus has just placed himself on the anvil. The separation is complete. The slave army has severed its own limb. Crixus takes his 30,000 followers and camps near Mount Garganus, overlooking the Adriatic Sea. He is drunk on confidence. He believes the Romans are weak, soft and ripe for harvest. But Crixus has forgotten a fundamental rule of warfare. Do not underestimate an enemy that has conquered the known world. The consul Gellius Publicola is not a frightened militia leader. He is a methodical butcher. He tracks Crixus down with terrifying speed. He does not offer a parley. He does not wait for Crixus to form battle lines. Publicola strikes at dawn. The legions crash into the disorganized camp of the rebels like a tidal wave of iron. The Gauls and Germans fight with the ferocity of berserkers, but bravery is no match for discipline. The Roman shield wall grinds forward, step by bloody step. It is a slaughterhouse. Crixus fights in the centre of the melee. Accounts say he killed a dozen legionaries before he finally fell, pierced by a Roman lance. The wolf of the rebellion is dead. Of the 30,000 men who followed him, 2/3 are butchered on the spot. The survivors scatter into the woods, hunted like sport. Publicola sends a message to his colleague, the other consul, Lentulus Clodianus. One head is cut off. Now for the other. The trap is set for Spartacus. The Romans execute a classic pincer movement, a strategy designed to crush an enemy between two closing walls. Lentulus marches his legions to block the road in the north, cutting off the escape route to the Alps. Publicola, fresh from his victory at Garganus, marches from the south to chase Spartacus from behind. They have the Thracian in a box. It is the hammer and anvil. Spartacus is the metal in between. But Spartacus receives news of Crixus's death. He does not panic. He does not grieve, not yet. He calculates. He knows that if the two Roman armies link up, he is finished. His only chance is speed. He has to move faster than a legion can march. He does the unthinkable. Instead of digging in or fleeing to the sides, he accelerates straight toward Lentulus in the north. He chooses to attack the blocking force head-on before the chasing force can arrive. Spartacus hits Lentulus's legions with the force of a freight train. He unleashes his heavy infantry, the very men he drilled through the winter. They smash through the Roman centre. Lentulus, expecting a desperate defensive rabble, is shattered by an aggressive offensive. His legions break. The Roman baggage train is captured. The anvil is destroyed. But Spartacus doesn't stop to celebrate. He knows Publicola is still coming up from the rear, thinking he is chasing a fleeing enemy. Spartacus spins his entire army around. He marches back the way he came, straight into the face of the second consul. Publicola is caught completely off guard. He expects to find Spartacus pinned against Lentulus. Instead, he finds Lentulus's army gone and Spartacus charging at him. The psychological shock is devastating. The victors of Mount Garganus are routed. Publicola flees. In a span of days, one former slave has dismantled the armies of both consuls of Rome. The Republic is stunned. The path to the Alps is now wide open. There is nothing standing between the slaves and their freedom. They can walk home. But Spartacus stops. Something has changed. Maybe it is the taste of total victory. Maybe it is the rage over the death of Crixus. Or maybe, looking at the thousands of Romans he has just captured, he realizes that simply leaving is not enough. He wants to send a message that will burn itself into the Roman psyche forever. He orders the march to halt. He gathers his army. He brings out the 300 Roman prisoners, centurions, tribunes, proud citizens of the Republic. He does not execute them. That would be too quick. That would be too kind. Spartacus looks at the captured Roman armor and weapons piled high. He looks at the 300 trembling prisoners, and then he looks at his own men, the former gladiators who were forced to kill their brothers for the amusement of a cheering Roman crowd. He orders the Romans to arm themselves. He creates a circle in the dirt. He tells the slaves to sit down and watch. He's going to host a funeral game to honor the ghost of Crixus. But this time, the roles are reversed. The masters will fight to the death. The slaves will be the spectators. The world is turned upside down. Imagine you are a Roman soldier. A week ago, you were a proud member of the legions, marching under the eagle standard, convinced of your superiority. Now, you're naked, shivering in the mud, clutching a gladius that feels too heavy in your hand. You're not standing in a grand colosseum. There is no marble here, only a crude ring of wooden stakes driven into the earth. Surrounding you are thousands of people you once considered farm equipment, slaves, shepherds. They are screaming, jeering, betting on how long you will last. Across the ring stands your opponent. It is not a barbarian. It is Gaius, the man you shared bread with, the man you marched beside for 3 years. He looks at you with eyes full of tears and terror. A large Thracian steps forward. He raises his hand. Silence falls. He nods. You have no choice. If you refuse, they will burn you alive. So, you raise your sword. You attack your friend. This was the reality of the funeral games held by Spartacus. It was theatre of the macabre. By forcing 300 Roman prisoners to fight to the death as gladiators, Spartacus wasn't just executing enemies. He was dismantling the Roman soul. He was holding up a mirror to the Republic. He was saying, "Look at what you made us do. Now, see how it feels." The psychological impact on Rome is catastrophic. When news of these games reaches the capital, the elite are paralyzed. Their moral hierarchy, where Romans are masters and everyone else is a beast, has been shattered. But Spartacus does not linger on the spectacle. He burns the remaining equipment, slaughters the pack animals to lighten the load, and drives his army north with renewed urgency. He knows the window of opportunity is closing. They reach the province of Cisalpine Gaul, modern-day northern Italy. Only one obstacle remains between them and the Alps, the governor, Gaius Cassius Longinus. Longinus has 10,000 men. He waits near the city of Mutina. He thinks he can stop the avalanche. He is wrong. Spartacus hits him with the momentum of a storm. The battle is barely a contest. The slave army, now battle-hardened and flushed with the victories over the consuls, sweeps Longinus aside as if he were nothing. The governor barely escapes with his life. And then it happens. The moment that has baffled historians for 2,000 years. Spartacus stands at the foot of the Alps. Look at the geography. The mountains are right there. The white peaks glisten in the sun. Beyond them lie the free lands of Gaul, Germania, and Thrace. There are no Roman legions waiting on the other side. The road is open. The war is effectively won. All they have to do is climb, but they don't. Spartacus gives the order to turn around. Why? This decision remains the greatest mystery of the Third Servile War. Did the army refuse to leave? It is possible. Many of them were now rich with plunder. They saw Italy not as a prison, but as a treasure chest waiting to be emptied. Why go back to a hard life of farming in a cold barbarian village when they could be kings in the south? Or was it Spartacus himself? Did victory poison his judgment? Did he begin to believe his own legend, that he could actually march on Rome itself and topple the Republic? We will never know the conversation that took place in the command tent that night. We only know the consequence. The army turns its back on freedom. They march south, back into the wolf's mouth. In Rome, the panic turns into a strange hollow silence. The consuls have failed. The praetors have failed. The governor has failed. There are no more armies to send. The path to the capital is defenceless. The Senate convenes in the Temple of Concord. The mood is funereal. They ask for a commander to take charge of the war against the gladiators. Usually, ambitious men would fight for such a command. Glory is the currency of Rome. But this time, nobody stands up. To fight Spartacus is to risk humiliation. If you win, you defeated a slave. There is no glory in that. If you lose, you are the laughingstock of history. The respected names of the Senate stare at their feet. The silence stretches on, heavy and shameful. Then, from the back of the room, a man stands up. He is not a great general. He is a businessman. He is the largest landlord in Rome, a man who owns silver mines, fire brigades, and tenement blocks. He is dangerously ambitious and obscenely wealthy. His name is Marcus Licinius Crassus. He looks around the frightened Senate and speaks calmly. He does not ask for legions, he offers to buy them. He will fund an army out of his own pocket. He effectively offers to privatize the war. The Senate, desperate and humiliated, agrees. They give him the command. They have no idea that they have just unleashed a monster far colder and far more calculating than Spartacus ever was. Crassus leaves the Senate house. He does not go to the temples to pray. He goes to the recruiters. He's about to teach the slaves and the Romans the true meaning of discipline. Marcus Licinius Crassus does not fight for honor. He fights for an investment. To him, the Roman Republic is not just a nation. It is a portfolio, and right now, the value of that portfolio is plummeting because of a Thracian slave. Crassus intends to correct the market. He takes command of 6 new legions, funds them, equips them, and owns them. But he also inherits the remnants of the consular armies that Spartacus had humiliated. These men are broken. They are used to running away. They have looked into the eyes of the slave army and blinked. Crassus knows that before he can defeat Spartacus, he must defeat his own soldiers' cowardice. He tests them immediately. He sends his lieutenant Mummius with 2 legions to shadow Spartacus. The orders are explicit. Do not engage. Do not skirmish. Just watch. But Mummius is arrogant. He sees an opportunity to grab glory for himself. He ignores the orders and attacks Spartacus near Picenum. The result is predictable. The slaves, fighting with the confidence of undefeated veterans, shatter the Roman lines. Mummius flees. His soldiers throw down their shields and run for their lives. They return to Crassus's camp in shame, expecting a reprimand. They do not get a reprimand. They get decimation. This is a punishment so ancient and so cruel that even in 71 BC it is considered a myth from a darker time. But Crassus revives it. He gathers the 500 soldiers who had led the retreat. He divides them into groups of 10. Picture the scene. 10 men stand in a circle. They are friends. They have shared meals, marched together, slept side by side. In the centre of the circle sits a helmet containing 10 stones. 9 are white, 1 is black. Each man draws a stone. If you draw white, you live. If you draw black, you die. But you're not executed by an executioner. You are clubbed to death by the other 9 men in your circle. You're friends. The camp falls into a terrified silence. The sound of wooden clubs striking flesh echoes through the ranks. 50 men are bludgeoned into pulp by their weeping comrades. When it is over, Crassus walks among the survivors. He tells them simply, "You should fear your general more than you fear the enemy." It works. The lethargy vanishes. The insubordination evaporates. The Roman army that marches out of that camp is no longer a collection of individuals. It is a single, terrified, lethal instrument. Spartacus, meanwhile, is moving south again. He likely realizes his mistake in turning back from the Alps. But it is too late to reverse course now. He heads for the toe of Italy, to the port of Rhegium. He has a new plan. If he cannot march home, he will sail away. He wants to cross the narrow strait to Sicily. Sicily is a powder keg. It has a history of massive slave revolts. Spartacus believes that if he can land there, he can ignite the entire island and create a new kingdom of the free. He strikes a deal with Cilician pirates, the gangsters of the Mediterranean. They promise him a fleet of transport ships. Spartacus pays them in advance, handing over the vast treasures he has looted from the Italian countryside. He waits on the beach at Rhegium, scanning the horizon for the sails that will carry his people to safety. Days pass, then weeks. The horizon remains empty. The pirates never show up. They have taken the gold and laughed all the way to the bank, or perhaps Crassus, the richest man in Rome, simply paid them more to stay away. Spartacus is stranded. He has the sea at his back and the wrath of Rome approaching from the front, and Crassus is coming. But the Roman general does not attack. He has learned from the mistakes of his predecessors. He sees the slaves trapped on the peninsula of Rhegium and he decides to lock the door. He orders his legions to dig. They are not digging graves, they are digging a trench 15 feet deep and 15 feet wide. Behind it they build a wall of stone and timber, fortified with watchtowers. And they do not just build a short barrier. They build it all the way from the Tyrrhenian Sea to the Ionian Sea. 37 miles of fortifications, built in record time. Spartacus wakes up one morning to find that the Italian peninsula has been cut off. He's no longer leading an army. He's governing a prison colony. Behind him is the water. In front of him is the wall. And inside the camp, the food is running out. Winter is coming. The trap has snapped shut. The trap is perfect. On the peninsula of Rhegium, history turns into a waiting game. Inside the blockade, resources dwindle. The 70,000 rebels have eaten the cattle. They have eaten the pack animals. Now they are eyeing the leather of their shields and the bark of the trees. Starvation does not scream. It weakens. It saps the will to fight, turning warriors into walking skeletons. Outside the wall, Crassus sits comfortably in his tent. His supply lines are open. His men are well fed. He checks the perimeter daily. The trench is 15 feet deep. The wall is 12 feet high, topped with palisades. He has engineered a situation where he doesn't need to risk a single Roman life to win. He just needs to wait for winter to finish the job. But Spartacus refuses to die quietly. He launches probing attacks. Small groups of rebels throw themselves against the fortifications, testing for weak points. The Romans repel them easily. Crassus's sentries mock the starving slaves from atop the ramparts. They believe the war is over. Then the weather turns. A massive winter storm rolls in from the Tyrrhenian Sea. Snow swirls in blinding sheets. The wind howls like a banshee, drowning out the sound of footsteps and commands. Visibility drops to 0. For Crassus, this is miserable weather to be waited out by the fire. For Spartacus, it is a gift from the gods. He orders the entire army to mobilize. This is not a raid, it is an evacuation. They approach a section of the Roman trench under the cover of the screaming wind. The ditch is a gaping maw, too wide to jump, too deep to climb out of quickly. Spartacus has no bridge-building equipment. He has no engineers. So he builds a bridge out of refuse. The rebels carry bundles of wood, rocks, and earth. They dump them into the trench. It isn't enough. The hole is too deep. Desperation takes over. They throw in the carcasses of the dead horses, then the prisoners. In the frenzy of the dark, the ditch becomes a grisly soup of mud, snow, timber, and flesh. They stomp it down. They pack it tight. They literally pave the road to freedom with the debris of their suffering. The first wave of rebels scrambles across this makeshift causeway. They scale the wall on the other side. The Roman sentries, blinded by the snow and deafened by the wind, realize too late that the shadows moving in the dark are armed men. The alarm goes up. Trumpets blare, but the sound is snatched away by the gale. Chaos erupts along the line. The fighting is brutal and confused. It is hand-to-hand combat in a blizzard. Legionaries stab at shapes in the dark. Gladiators slip on the icy ramparts, dragging Romans down with them into the freezing mud. By the time Crassus mobilizes his main force, the breach is open. The dam has burst. Tens of thousands of rebels pour through the gap, streaming back into the open Italian countryside like a flood. But the cost is staggering. When the sun rises over the blood-stained snow, The magnitude of the escape becomes clear. Spartacus has broken out, yes, but he has left behind nearly 12,000 dead. The trench is filled with bodies. The snow is red. Crassus stands on the wall looking at the footprints leading north into Lucania. He is furious. He had them. He had the war in the palm of his hand, and it slipped through his fingers like water. Panic sets in. Crassus knows that if Spartacus reaches Rome now, the Senate will never forgive him. His investment will be worthless. His reputation will be in tatters. In a moment of fear, Crassus makes a political blunder. He writes to the Senate. He tells them the situation is critical. He asks them to recall Pompey from Spain and Lucullus from Thrace to help entrap the rebels. As soon as the letter leaves his hand, Crassus regrets it. He realizes that by inviting Pompey, he's inviting his greatest rival to steal his glory. Pompey is the darling of Rome, the teenage butcher, the man who always swoops in at the last minute to claim the victory. If Pompey arrives before Crassus kills Spartacus, Pompey will get the triumph. Crassus will be a footnote. Suddenly the motivation changes. Crassus is no longer fighting just to save Rome. He is fighting against the clock. He has to hunt Spartacus down and annihilate him before Pompey's ships appear on the horizon. The war of attrition is over. The race has begun. You would think they had learned. You would think the ghost of Crixus, slaughtered at Mount Garganus, would haunt every council meeting. But memory is short, and greed is eternal. Having escaped the frozen hell of Rhegium, the rebel army marches into the hills of Lucania. They are battered, starving, and exhausted. But they are free. Spartacus, ever the strategist, knows they are still in mortal danger. He wants to keep moving, to find a defensible position, or a route to the coast where they might seize ships. But the coalition fractures again. Two leaders, Castus and Gannicus, decide they are tired of running. They command a significant force of Gauls and Germans, men who believe that the escape from Crassus's wall was a sign of invincibility, not desperate luck. They look at the rich Italian countryside and see loot. They separate from Spartacus, taking 12,000 men with them to camp by the Lucanian lake. It is a decision of staggering stupidity. Crassus is no longer the cautious investor waiting behind a wall. He's a predator racing against time. His scouts spot the isolated camp of Castus and Gannicus. He does not hesitate. Crassus hits them with overwhelming force. It isn't a battle. It is an execution. The legions descend on the unsuspecting rebels, pinning them against the water. When Spartacus hears the noise of battle and rushes back to save them, he finds only carnage. The field is carpeted with bodies. Roman historians record a chilling statistic from this massacre. Of the 12,300 rebels killed, only 2 were found with wounds on their backs. Everyone else died facing the enemy. They were brave, undoubtedly, but they were dead. Spartacus manages to extract the few survivors, but the damage is done. His army is shrinking. The morale is shattering. And now the map itself begins to close in. Scouts bring word from the coast. Ships have been spotted, but they are not pirate ships. They are Roman triremes. Pompey the Great has landed. Fresh from his victories in Spain, he is marching south to intercept the rebels. From the east, another threat emerges. The proconsul Marcus Terentius Lucullus has landed at Brundisium, with his legions from Thrace. The net is complete. Crassus is behind them. Pompey is ahead of them. Lucullus is flanking them. Spartacus retreats into the mountains of Petelia, hoping to wage a guerrilla war, to bleed the Romans in the rough terrain. But even here, he loses control. His own men turn on him, not to kill him, but to disobey him. The rebels are tired of retreating. They are tired of the snow, the hunger, and the running. When Crassus's vanguard nips at their heels, the slaves stop. They refuse to march further. They draw their swords and demand to be led back down the mountain, to face Crassus on the open plain. They want a final stand. They want it to end one way or another. Spartacus looks at his army. He sees the madness in their eyes, the fatalism of men who know they are doomed. He knows that fighting Crassus in the open is suicide. But he also knows he's no longer their general. He's just a man riding a tiger. He cannot get off. He agrees. He orders the army to turn around. They march down to the headwaters of the Silurus River. Crassus is waiting. He sees the slaves deploying for battle and he breathes a sigh of relief. He doesn't have to chase them anymore. He doesn't have to worry about Pompey stealing his triumph. The prey has walked willingly into the slaughterhouse. Spartacus prepares for the end. He knows this is not a battle for victory. It is a battle for a good death. The end begins not with a trumpet blast, but with a blade slicing through the neck of a horse. It is a moment that Plutarch and Appian both recorded, a detail so specific it rings with the absolute clarity of truth. The armies are arrayed across the plain near the Battle of the Silurus River. The sun is high. The dust is already rising. Spartacus stands before his men. His horse is brought to him, a magnificent beast, perhaps captured from a Roman officer. Spartacus draws his sword. The men expect him to mount up to ride above them as a general should. Instead, he thrusts the blade into the animal's chest. The horse collapses, blood soaking into the dry earth. Spartacus wipes his blade and turns to his shocked troops. He speaks loud enough for the front ranks to hear. If we win the day, I shall have a great many horses of the enemy. If we lose, I shall have no need of this one. It is the ultimate burning of the bridge. He's telling them that there is no retreat. There is no riding away. He will fight on foot, shoulder to shoulder with the lowest slave in the line. The signal is given. The roar of 70,000 throats shakes the air. The final battle of the Third Servile War begins. It is not a contest of manoeuvres. There are no clever flank attacks, no feigned retreats. This is a brawl. The slaves crash into the Roman shield wall with the force of a collapsing building. They fight with the manic energy of the doomed. They throw themselves onto the Roman scooter, trying to drag the shields down so their comrades can stab the legionaries behind them. But Spartacus has a different objective. He's not trying to break the Roman line. He's trying to cut a path through it. He spots Marcus Licinius Crassus. The Roman general is visible on his horse, surrounded by his elite guard, watching the slaughter from a safe distance. Spartacus knows that the slave army cannot defeat the Roman legions in a war of attrition. The only chance, the slim, impossible chance, is to cut off the head of the snake. If Crassus dies, the legions might panic. Spartacus ignores the soldiers attacking him. He charges straight for the general. Historical accounts describe a man possessed. Spartacus becomes a missile of flesh and iron. He hacks his way through the melee, taking wounds and ignoring them. He kills 2 Roman centurions, veteran officers who try to block his path. He cuts them down and keeps moving. He gets close. He's so close he can probably see the terror in Crassus's eyes. He can see the gold on the general's armour, but the Roman numbers are simply too great. As Spartacus pushes forward, the sheer weight of bodies slows him down. The legionaries swarm him. He's cut off from his men. A spear drives into his thigh. He falls, but he does not stop. Even on one knee bleeding out, holding his shield up against a rain of blows, Spartacus continues to fight. He kills anyone who comes within reach of his sword. Finally, the dam breaks. The Roman blades descend. The Thracian is hacked to pieces. He disappears under a mound of dead Romans. With their leader gone, the spirit of the rebellion snaps. The slave army disintegrates. It turns into a rout. The legions move forward, grinding the survivors into the dust. The river Silurus runs red, choked with the bodies of men who dared to dream of the home. When the dust settles, the silence is deafening. The carnage is absolute. Crassus rides through the field looking for the body of his enemy. He wants the trophy. He wants to drag Spartacus's corpse through the streets of Rome. But he never finds him. Thousands of bodies are turned over. Tens of thousands of faces are checked. But Spartacus is gone. He was chopped so finely, or buried so deep under the piles of the slain, that he returned to the earth anonymously. This missing body becomes his final victory. By denying Rome his corpse, he denies them the closure they crave. He becomes a ghost. He becomes a legend. But for the survivors, there is no legend. There is only the chain. Crassus captures 6,000 prisoners. He looks at them, huddled and bleeding. A lesser man might have sold them back into slavery to recoup his expenses. Crassus is a businessman, after all. But today he's not interested in profit. He is interested in a statement. He wants to ensure that no slave ever dares to look a Roman in the eye again. He orders timber